This week you're going to be heading into John chapter 7 and 8. Just as I say, you can hear there's quite a long section. It's important that you make sure you've got a bit of time to read it in advance and have a think about it. But as you read it and think about it, don't forget that it follows as part of a whole train of thoughts that John has been laying out, or better perhaps, this whole story that John has been telling. A story of Jesus coming into the world, being greeted, or perhaps not greeted, by the Jews. Now that's an idea that's laid out up front in John chapter 1, when in the prologue it says, his own did not receive him. But that's a real surprise to us, not least because Jesus has been making remarkable, wonderful claims about himself. He's full of grace and truth, and he says of himself that he is one with the Father. He is God himself in human form, that he's doing the work of God. They're staggering claims which are perhaps best summed up as Jesus saying that he is the one who is from above, who has come to open up the way back to us, to heaven. He's the light that's broken into the world. And in the section that we're in now, John chapters 5 to 10, particularly John uses the device of lots of Old Testament imagery to help us understand more fully who Jesus is. Each of the sections within the section start with a feast or a festival. So John chapter 5 we were told it was a Sabbath. John chapter 6 we were told it was Passover. In John 7 we're told it's the Feast of Booths. And if you remember last week, you remember all of the Old Testament, or particularly the Exodus imagery that John used to make his points. Jesus comes at Passover, that's an Exodus festival. He comes as the bread from heaven, which again is a very Exodus image. And there were lots of other allusions as well. Well, now in John chapter 7, like I say, it's the Feast of Booths, which is a feast that you might not be very familiar with. It's one we don't know so much about. There's not quite so much about it in the Old Testament. But in short, it was a feast that the Jews celebrated, probably at the end of the summer, beginning of the autumn, to celebrate God's provision for them. Often it coincided with harvest time. God's provision for them generally, but specifically in bringing them out of the wilderness and into the promised land. And it was celebrated using both a ceremony where they poured water out at the temple, and a ceremony where they lit lights. Keep an eye out for those images as you read through John chapters 7 and 8. But the point is a simple one. Basically, John is saying consistently throughout this section, look, Jesus has come to fulfill everything that the Old Testament was about. The Jewish scriptures point again and again and again to him. The troubling thing is that the Jews just don't seem to get it. Have you noticed whenever Jesus is dialoguing with Jewish people in John's Gospel, they can't seem to understand what he's saying. He says, I'm from heaven and I'm going to speak to you about and do miracles that point to heavenly realities. And yet they can't seem to get their heads out of the earthly realities all around them. Jesus says to Nicodemus, you've got to be born again. He says, what do you mean? I've got to go back into my mum's tummy. He says to the Jews, I've come to give you bread, and they say, yeah, we want bread. They follow around looking for more actual physical bread. He says, no, I'm the bread from heaven. They have this sort of inability to see beyond the earthly and to the heavenly. And it's a really big deal. It's a really big problem. If the Messiah comes into the world and his own don't receive him, don't understand him, and indeed it looks like maybe even reject him, that might raise in our minds a problem. Were they right to do that? What do we understand by the fact that the Jews don't receive their Messiah? Is that a problem? It seems like it could be quite a big problem. The whole weight of Bible history up to that point has been pointing to the fact that the Jews should receive their Messiah, and yet they're not. What do we make of that? And if you're someone who's just become a Christian in the midst of a Jewish context, that's a really big problem, because you're looking at them and saying they're the spiritual people with all the promises, and yet none of them trust in Jesus Christ. Well, as we dive into John chapter 7, you will see that this inability begins to intensify, and more than that, get explained. But as that happens, there's really good news, because Jesus at the same time is standing up saying, do you know what? I am the light of the world. in the midst of this darkness. And I am the one who will pour out water, or more specifically, the Spirit, in a way that will bring an opening of eyes for people. So enjoy digging into it, and I'll look forward to hearing how you get on.